The Church in the British Isles will only begin to grow when she begins to again venerate her own saints, the Venerable Arsenios of Paros. In reviving the memory of the saints of the early Church in Britain, there will hopefully once again be an appreciation of the great history of the English Church, a renewed appreciation of these saints, their piety, and their contributions to the growth and holiness of this ancient and once great church. Some of the names will be familiar to you, most probably will not. Hopefully, with a renewed familiarity with them, we too will draw near to them. And hopefully, in venerating them once again, the English Church will in turn grow once again.
One of the benefits of inheriting an existing church is the library that the previous priest leaves behind. My predecessor left a nice library of books, and among them were a few that focused on the early church in Britain. The Anglican Church is the British Church. And what these books have done is set me on a trajectory looking into the church in Britain in more detail, and of course the earlier the better. Many, even within Anglicanism, tend to treat the English Church, or more often spoken of as the Anglican Church, or sometimes even the Episcopal Church. They speak of it as being a product of the Reformation, and this is simply not true. There were changes and corrections that were made in the English Church during that time, but the English Church is much older than that. And some of the doctrines that came out of the Reformation that some, even in the English Church, incorporated into their practice were not the doctrines of the early church, nor the early church of the first centuries at all. This is obviously, you can tell this is not going to be a series on the Reformation Church. I want to focus on something different, as far as I can tell, and maybe unique that in the whole world of videos made about Anglicanism. Once we begin to roll back the clock to the first millennium and even further, we begin to see names, or we hear of places that we usually don't associate with the Church of England. I'll also be using the term Orthodox from time to time. There is that capital O Orthodox, which is referring to the Eastern Church, but that's not how I'm going to be using the term generally. It's more I'm going to use more of a general use of the term. When something is simply Orthodox, it means it's correct. It's something that's been said or being done in the proper, correct way. Even Webster's online dictionary says that it's conforming to an established doctrine, especially in religion. So of course it still kind of dominates the religion in the definition, and there's Orthodox Judaism as well too. So the term is used in a number of places. So Orthodox doesn't necessarily mean Eastern, at least when we'll be using it here, as it does in correct teaching, correct doctrine. The English Church, when understood from the standpoint of being early or part of the undivided church and sharing in the same theology, the same beliefs, the same practices of the undivided early church, can be considered to be truly early and unified and Orthodox, even though it's not at the same time Eastern. There's a quote from a man named John Maximovich. He's an archbishop in the Russian Orthodox Church, born 1896, died 1966. And he says that miracles were attributed to him, healing, prophecy, and so forth. But I want to bring him into the discussion here because, as I mentioned at the beginning, there's a quote that I found quite interesting from one of those little books that I found. And he says this, he says, quote, "Never, never, never let anyone tell you that in order to be Orthodox, you must also be Eastern. The West was Orthodox for 1,000 years, and her venerable liturgy is far older than any of her heresies," unquote. So the heresies there would be something like the Nicene Creed being changed to add the filioque clause and things like that. But this got me to consider the fact that the church in England has its roots firmly established in the earliest times of the Christian church, and was solidly, for at least the first 1,000 years, unified with both East and West unified. We also tend to focus sometimes on the heretical, the blasphemous, at times, things that the modern Episcopal Church engages in. But there was a time when things were quite sound in the English Church, long before even the corrections of the Reformation. So this is sort of an introduction to a longer series of videos, or a series of videos that I hope to make here, looking at the earliest times in the Church of England, especially looking at the saints of that early period, the first millennium, in hopes it's going to bring new light to us as Anglicans. It's going to perhaps bring a renewed interest in the English Church for people, because it, letting them know that it still survives today, where the ancient faith is still practiced and taught. This is also an introduction to what later videos will show, hoping to focus again on the saints of the early church, and which establishes sort of the ancient nature of the church, because the saints are kind of recognized both east and west. And perhaps this will also bring interest and maybe a sense of pride to those within the Anglican or English church today through an understanding of her history and her ancient roots. And maybe it will begin to call us back even to those earliest times, so the church today will begin to turn back to those ancient practices, those ancient doctrines, those ancient beliefs, the ancient faith that we all shared. And it will maybe inspire the church to turn away from many of the damaging and heretical things, unorthodox practices in the modern-day Episcopal Church that people are participating in today. So I hope you'll enjoy this series. Hope it'll be very beneficial to you and help you have a greater understanding of the Christian church through the church in England.